Chapter 21. How about if I start with right in the middle? Sherry, how about you?
Okay. David, now please to Nob. What do you know about the city? They talk about when Shiloh was destroyed,
Okay.
the priesthood went to Nob, residing in there now.
Okay, very good. So, because of that, what would be there in that city? The tabernacle would be there, the priesthood, the ark, all of the Levites. That's where they would gather for the most part. It would be the holy city at the time. All right, number 2. Go ahead.
Ahimelech greets David as he enters the city. What question does he first ask David? Why are you alone?
Okay, and why would that be something you'd want to know? Why are you alone?
It would just be unusual, wouldn't it, for him to...
Well, normally he'd be with his whole band of warriors.
That's right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
the fact that he was there, by himself was
He would be with the
was
army.
telling.
According to the high priest, he should be with the army of Saul.
Yeah.
He should be with his regiment, a little pomp and circumstance.
But there could have been some rumors of fallout between him and Saul by then, too.
It could have been, but it appears to me from what he says in our next chapter that he's not really up to speed on this controversy that's going on between Saul and David. It's hard to understand how that could be a secret, given all the different attempts that Saul was making and how blatant he was about it, but it would appear that it's not common knowledge, or perhaps the priesthood just stayed out of the fray of that sort of thing. They're very busy with what they're doing. They have other things that they're focused on.
Well, even David was dense about it. So
They're attempting.
I mean, even as arrows are being thrown at him,
Yeah.
right, or spears.
Yeah. And Jonathan is continuing to hope that he's going to be able to create some reconciliation there
Yeah.
between his dad and David. So there seems to be not a real clear picture the way we're reading it. When we read it time after time, the spear throw and the messengers go. We read it and we go, how could everyone not see that? But I think if you were there in the midst of it, living your life, doing your things, maybe it wasn't the talk of the town. And people weren't totally aware of what was going on. So in answer to our question, when he would come up, David shouldn't really be out wandering by himself, right?
And they didn't have fake news then, so.
And it would.
I mean,
Well,
they
maybe
didn't
they
have
did.
I didn't mean that.
And it would appear that David probably came without any sort of weaponry, and he is just like maybe in just street clothes, what we'd call street clothes, a little disheveled
Without his armor.
from climbing out a window and being on the run on foot and not having food, obviously, hungry. And so it's not at all the way that you would anticipate seeing a man of David's reputation.
And did anyone feel safe traveling those roads without a few?
Exactly. It would have been highly unusual to go by yourself, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of like going to the mall. What? You're going by yourself? Only far worse, yeah.
Yeah, and Ahimelech, you would think as high priest, should have discernment and wisdom and some things. And it sounds like he's sensing something fishy is going on.
Maybe so. Or for all the above reasons that we just talked about, it's obvious that something weird is going on. I mean, it's just blatantly right out there in your face that that's an odd thing. If you saw a congressman or the mayor of your town or anybody come up to your house with their hair sticking all up and one flip-flop off and asking you for something to drink, you're gonna go, what's going on? Where's everybody at?
Also, even today, if you came to see me, and when I lived in another state, I would go, well, why are you by yourself? In other words, they would just expect other people to be there, just like we expect. If you would come, I would go, well,
Mom, I always came by myself.
well, I knew why. I knew why. But if I ever went back to see my mom when I lived out here, if I came by myself, she wanted to know why.
Yeah, I know.
I want to ask you a quick question. And
Sure.
that is, in the culture of the time, did people travel alone very often?
Not very often, no. Yeah, you would travel in groups for what Jane said exactly, safety
For
reasons,
safety.
and because you were on the road for long periods of time. You're not talking about a day trip.
Yeah.
You're not talking. This is a long period of time. You need people to build camp and hunt food and do the things that you need to have done, and so it's not safe to be out there on your own. So it's definitely a red blinker on him. All right, number 3. Where are we at?
I'm at
You.
Okay. How does David answer, and what is wrong with that answer? David told him that Saul, the king, sent him on a secret mission, on business, and that he was to tell no one. He said that he sent his men to another location, and it was all a lie.
Okay, so that would be what is wrong with that. Obviously, Saul has not ordered him on a business trip. Obviously, Saul did not tell him not to tell anyone. We did, however, get into a little bit of discussion last week about the fact that when you go over into the correlating Matthew chapter, where Jesus talks about it when the disciples are plucking grain off of the head, and he says, "Don't you remember back when David," and he talks about David and his companions. And I said, that was kind of surprising to me. I guess I hadn't really caught that previous until I was comparing the two side by side. Perhaps David did have his men with him, and they were elsewhere. Perhaps there were some that were elsewhere, hidden away, because Jesus obviously would have known that when he said, "And David and his companions came and asked for provision."
Well,
So
when he left here, didn't he leave with 400 men?
no, the 400 men are going to come at a different time. He's snuck away out the window and been on the road.
No, I mean after that.
Afterwards, yes,
So he traveled with
a group
a
afterwards.
group of people.
A group of warriors afterwards, absolutely.
He knew where they were to bring the bread, so he must have kind of.
So while it is obvious he has lied about some of it, that maybe that there's some kernels of truth in there, and some other parts that he's just sort of building on. We were laughing earlier about manipulating the truth, manipulating the facts. He's kind of stacking it. But some of these are just blatant lies. There's just nothing else you can say about it.
Something seemed odd. Okay, here's 5 loaves of bread, but he said, "I have these men stashed."
Mm-hmm.
It's like a drop in the bucket. It sounds like.
Well-
to feed that many people.
Well, that's a really good point. However, the 5 loaves of bread would not have been, the pictures that they show, like the one that's on the front page there, show like a biscuit or a pancake sized thing. It's really more culturally factual, that the loaves of bread were square, rectangular type things that the priests would carry on their shoulders over to the thing, likely very large loaves. Not that would still feed a tremendous amount of people, but they're probably far bigger than the way that they're depicted here as just like an individual portion size. And
What you get, whatever you can get. when you're hungry.
exactly. And asking for half is pretty bold. It would be even more bold to say, "Can I have everything you have?" So that may be part of why that's done that way. All right, so number 4,
Now David has a request. He asked for bread. What is available to him, and what were the requirements for getting them? He had the holy bread of the showbread. Then the requirements were that the men had kept themselves from women.
Okay. Kept themselves from women or from sexual relations is actually what they're talking about here. It's not being in the presence of a woman that was defiling. So the showbread that Randy just mentioned, she called it the holy bread. That's what it was. Anybody remember the other names that I told you that the actual Hebrew word for showbread means?
Face.
Bread of face or presence, because you would eat that to be in the presence of the Lord, and so that was it was considered a bread that it was like a fellowship meal that you would have with the Lord. And if you remember from our discussion, what would happen is every Sabbath they would bring in 10 fresh loaves, hot fresh loaves of bread, and then the 10 loaves that were on the table that was
I thought it was 12.
12. I'm sorry, I keep saying 10. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And they would, you're right. They would take them off and they would, the priests would eat them. That would be bread that they could consume and eat. And
Then it wouldn't be holy then?
well, it would still
After
be,
they replaced it?
it would be holy in a different way. It would be set aside for a different purpose, but it would become far more common than the bread that was actually there in the presence of the Lord. And so remember, as is true with every object of the tabernacle when we studied Exodus, as is true with us today and that whole gambit in between, what makes something holy?
God.
God, the presence of the Lord in it, and that God makes the people of Israel are just people. They're nothing special, but they're holy to the Lord because He chooses to make them holy. We are just people, sinners, but we become holy because the Lord chooses to make us holy. Every item in the tabernacle was just metal and bread. But it becomes holy because of the presence of the Lord set aside for that. And that's what makes anything holy. And so that's what would make these holy. So, okay, good deal on that one. All right, number 5.
That's me. One of Saul's men was there, and who is he? Doeg, an Adamite.
The Edomite, that's right. That's right. Why don't you take 6? That was an easy one.
Oh,
Oh, you have something else with it? Go.
one of the men. Oh, just that's all I put on there. And then
Okay.
I put Saul. He was Saul's herdsman, chief herdsman, and he was not a Jew nor Israelite, maybe a slave.
Okay, so
Is that true?
Well, what we talked about is that he was an Edomite, okay, an Edomite. And so the discussion was, why would an Edomite be in such a place of prominence there in Saul's army? We had some talk about why would that be. And so one of the things that is talked about that is a potential is at some point previous to this, could he have been someone that was captured and showed such great promise that Saul used him just like Daniel? When Daniel was captured and brought into Babylon, he was put into a great position because the Nebuchadnezzar looked at him and saw the potential that was in Daniel, and so he continued to go through the ranks, even though he was a Jew and an Israelite and not a Babylonian. And so the discussion is, why would an Edomite be there? And that's one of the things that we talked about, is how he.
So he herd, and they kept him in charge of that herd. Since they were trading all the time.
Yeah.
The sheep knew him as a shepherd.
Could be.
That
It could be.
it was
There's a lot of different reasons, and the scripture doesn't tell us, so we're open to discussion.
Right.
Everyone has
So
an
he
opinion.
could have been a slave and later became the chief herdsman.
He could have been. It could have been.
I gotcha.
Exactly. A lot of different reasons why he was there. The important part for our story to know for sure is that he wasn't an Israelite. He wasn't a Jewish person.
Right.
In there. All right. And so number 6.
And
David will now have a second request. He asked for what? A weapon or a sword.
Okay.
And he said that the king's business required haste, so he didn't bring any with him.
That's right.
And there was no other weapon or sword there but the one that killed Goliath, that was wrapped in an ephod.
Okay, so she did 6 and 7, guys.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. No problem. So he asked for a weapon and a sword because he came and didn't have anything. Once again, he lied and told him that the king's business was so urgent he didn't have anything. And then looked down into 7 because and so what was he given? He was given the sword that had been used to kill Goliath, which was Goliath's own sword. We talked about it weighing 15 pounds approximately, that it was a huge thing. I can't even imagine a guy, really, you would have to be trained to use that, but it was a great sword, and it was something that was there. What was surprising about the fact that he got offered that? Anybody?
Because he killed Goliath with it. David killed Goliath
Okay,
with it.
okay.
dedicated it. he'd given it.
He had not seen
Yeah,
it.
There you go.
He had not seen it.
It had been, he had, the last time we saw it, the last time we read the story and saw it, it had been put into David's tent. And so evidently it had now been taken, dedicated, it had been kept with the holy garments, because it was behind the ephod.
Yeah.
And so, it would be surprising now for us, not knowing that journey, to see that it was in David's tent and he had possession of it, and now here he is
Right.
being offered it.
And you also pointed out last week that he was, that happened when he was a young boy.
Yes.
So it wouldn't be like it would be a big deal maybe to him, or you know, not as, I mean, it could kill Goliath, true, but it happened when he was a young boy, so he probably hadn't thought about it that much, where that sword was.
Well, I kind of think that killing Goliath was a big deal to David, in that that's what his reputation was built on. With Saul, with the people of Israel, it's how he kind of got into that position. His slaughtering of the giant was a big deal, and so I kind of feel like,
Well, what was
that
it you mentioned about him, because it happened when he was a young boy, that's...
well,
You just said it was an interesting choice.
I did.
Oh,
I don't
did
think
ya?
I remember.
Okay.
I don't think I mentioned it, but he
I
was
thought
a
maybe
young
he had
boy.
forgotten it.
No, he was about 15 when he did it. So you're correct. He was a young man when he did it. But just like war stories don't lose anything through the years, you know, when you do something. I think that it is a big deal to David that he has this, and I think that he probably maybe lost track of the sword, and because he didn't know it was there. However,
It went to Shiloh first.
yeah. However, he may not know exactly where it was located, but I would imagine that many of his dreams were filled with the adventure of Goliath and the sword and all of that. Because while this is years later, I mean, it's not a lifetime later. He would certainly.
And maybe
remembered that.
maybe he did know it was there. Maybe he did know the
You
sword
could,
was
yeah.
there.
So he reminded him that
But
it was
he had
there.
the slingshot hanging in a frame on his wall.
There you go. We forgot about that. We forgot about that one.
Well,
All right.
Interesting that he has a tent there.
He.
Has a tent.
This would have been when he killed Goliath.
Are you talking about where the sword was?
Yeah.
That's the tabernacle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Back, but we talked
Oh,
about
okay.
it being in a tent back when he killed Goliath.
Okay.
And it said, and David took it to his tent, was what the scripture said.
Okay.
Now it's at the tabernacle in Nob, and so when it's
Right.
talking about the tent, it's talking about the tabernacle.
And do we know how it got there?
No,
That's what I was
yeah.
just gonna say. That's an interesting point, that it traveled.
Right.
Wow.
And that's why this question, we're now back full circle, why was it surprising, is because we don't have the details of how it got from here to here. We're creating some stories and some things that it might have been, but scripture doesn't tell us how that move took place. So it's kind of surprising that here now it's popping up at the tabernacle at this point. All right, number 8.
Pastor.
Pass.
Yes. Somewhere Philistines.
Huh?
Gath? What was it?
David will now flee to
Yeah.
Gath.
Oh, it was Gath.
Yeah,
Okay.
he is now going to flee to Gath according to verse 10. And then who else was from this town?
Yeah.
Goliath and Goliath's family, brothers. He has a father, he has 4 brothers. He's got a big bunch of people that live around in this area. And of course, everyone who would have ever known. So number 9, Trudy?
David seems surprised that they know about him. What if they heard that the song or psalm that they sang, Saul has slain thousands, David has slain 10,000s.
There you go. So, does it kind of surprise you that the Philistines would hear this from? This was first mentioned when Saul and David are coming back from having a battle with the Philistines long ago, and so it's kind of, in a sense, a little bit surprising that it's drifted. Although, if you look on a map, the distance isn't that far, and news probably traveled person to person, so somebody came and told the story. But here we are now in enemy territory, and that same song that the women sang when he came home from being successful with the battle is now
in their mind.
fresh.
Well,
They know that.
How many miles are we talking about?
Well, you can look on a map. I included a map in your packet. You also have one in your book.
Yeah.
But there's one in your current packet today. All of that area is reasonably close together, according to our terms
Yeah, that's
today.
what right.
You know, you're not talking about a huge distance. It's kind of like if you're in Israel and you say, how far is it to get to Gaza?
It's 20 miles across in those places.
It's just, you know, you're within a day's walking distance to just about anywhere you want to go. Like I've mentioned before, I've been to three border countries within a 6-hour drive. I mean, that's how close it is.
When I was reading this out of my Bible, and one of the footnotes, it had that, and it gave miles, and it was just like a few miles.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
something
it's not a big distance
easily
at all. We'll get to the map here a little later, and maybe it'll help look at that too. Number 10, Sherry.
Okay. Once he
Once he realized.
okay, that they know him, he becomes fearful, and why? He killed Goliath, and they recognize him. It says as the true king of the land.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Not funny, but isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they recognize him that, but primarily his fear comes from what? They know that he is the one who
Killed Goliath.
killed Goliath. And why is that a big deal to them? Because remember, Goliath was the word that was used as champion.
Yeah.
The man in the middle, the man who represented them when David came to kill them. He was one of them, and so now they recognize this is the same one. All right. And so, what shocking tactic does David use to get free?
He pretended to be mad, crazy.
Okay, how do you do that? Do you remember any of the details? What he said?
I remember the drooling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Saliva in his beard. What else? Anybody else?
Scratching
on the walls.
Scratching on the doors, and the word is used. It could be like this, but it could also just be making strange hieroglyphics. Scratching.
About the letter Tav being scratched in, which is actually the cross at that time.
Okay.
It's really weird.
Yeah. So the scratching, the scratchings that are in there, the etchings, the whatever he's doing is doing what? It's showing that he's a crazy madman. That's right. So he's using that tactic. Does it work?
Yes.
Okay, and what happens?
He doesn't want him.
That I didn't add this on here, but what happens? It's important. The king says, you know what? He goes, what does he say?
Have enough madmen.
I don't need any more. I don't need any more madmen. Let this one go away. Which is quite surprising given who David is. So God is at work here. What did we talk about earlier weeks ago? I'm going to bring it up multiple times because I really want you to see this. We are immortal until we have served the purposes of God. David really can't be killed. He can't be held. David, nothing Saul attempts against his life is going to be successful, at least until David's plans and purposes have been fulfilled. And that's just the way it is for everyone. God numbers your days, and it is that until that plan and purpose is fulfilled. And we're going to see that with David, which I think is really quite amazing and a good thing for us to learn. All right, let's just buzz over to the questions for chapter 22. Oh. Sorry, we did 2, Francie. I didn't mean to throw you off. Questions for chapter 22. Where did we end up? I've already lost track. Were we over here?
Yeah.
Debbie, was it you?
I answered the last one.
Okay,
Right,
then it would be Bonnie.
Okay, David escapes Gath and ends up where? Who comes to see him there? He ends up in the cave of Adullam.
Okay.
His father and brothers come, and all who were in debt and distress and discontented, about 400 men,
Okay.
join him there.
Okay, so that's 1 and 2 together. So let's talk about question 1 and 2 together. Okay. So he went to the cave of Adullam. That's right. His family came to see him. Last week we talked about why would his family come up there to see him?
They were afraid.
More than likely, they were afraid because Saul would have possibly used them or put them in danger also. And so they would have come there to see David. Do you remember how many brothers he has?
7?
Okay. and a dad, and so he's got a big little group of family that's coming up there. We don't know if the wives and kiddos and everybody, but we know a big group of the family came to see him. And then the second part of that, in question number 2, is it was a group of, and Bonnie answered that, how many? 400 men also come to find David in his new refuge. And what are we told about them? So if you go into 1 Chronicles 12:8, it gives you some details. What do you know?
They were Gadites, who were mighty men of valor, trained for battle, who could handle shield and spear, whose faces were like lions, and who were swift as gazelles on the mountains.
Okay, so this is a group of men, and what did we know about their personalities? It said they were in debt,
In
in
distress.
distress, in despair. We talked about the fact discontent, yeah, which the word actually means bitterness of spirit. And so we talked about the fact that while some of these may have just been exactly what that says, there's also this idea that God had promised, God had forewarned, not promised, had forewarned that having a king was not going to be a good thing for them. That was going to be something they were not going to be pleased with, that their crops would be taken, that their sons and daughters would be taken for usage, that their monies would be taken, that, they were not going to be pleased with having a king. And so some of these people may definitely have fallen into that category too. But these men of mighty valor, we're going to talk about in today's chapter in a little bit more detail. In fact, if you look at the picture of your packet today, I threw a little picture in down at the bottom, just an artist's rendering. This isn't an actual photograph of the mighty men of David, just talking about, we'll spend a little bit of time talking a little bit more about them, because honestly, they're going to play a very important part in Samuel, because not only do they come to David at this moment when he is in despair and has no one, not only does God send this group to him for David to lead, but they bind together as a family, and throughout the book of Samuel, we are going to see them standing beside David. They are loyal to David. They will be the ones who always have his back. And you're going to see that meld into this relationship. And so we know that while David was out on the run by himself in this despair, that God sends him 400 of the least likely people you could imagine to come together and meld together to be exactly what David is going to need to get him through the next part of his life.
Would you guess their families then did not come with them? Those 400.
I really don't have any way of knowing that for sure. We can guess and say it would be an awfully hard journey for women and children to be with them. Having said that, it doesn't mean that someone couldn't bring one, I guess. Would anybody else have an idea?
The Chptrs were always moving around with everyone they owned, so
Yeah.
it was a time when people were on the move in tents.
So, I mean,
David went to feed his brothers. I think they'd go back and forth, maybe.
So we just don't know scripturally. We just don't know. So anything that we would guess would just be our best guess on what it was. But so yeah.
But they're hiding, so we have to be a little careful.
Yeah, you wouldn't want a baby crying, right? So
True.
that's true. All right, number 3.
Why would David go to king of Moab, and what does he request from him? Well, Moab is where his ancestors on his mother's side are from.
Okay.
No, his father's, Ruth was a Moabitess.
She was a Moabitess.
So he brought his family for safety.
Okay. Very good. And so the book of Ruth, that Ruth is who we're talking about, of course, and she was from Moab. And so she, if you remember, she comes back with Naomi in that story and comes back into Bethlehem. And Ruth gives up everything from being a Moabite, and she becomes one of those proselytes eventually of Israel. And so the word we would use is converts, she becomes one of the nation of Israel, and it is through her lineage that David is going to come. Even more importantly, it is through her lineage further on that the greater son of David is going to come, which is Jesus, through that very lineage. And so when you look at the line of where Jesus comes from, there's a lot of little jags branches out, that God smooths out in the best ways as this lineage comes through. It's a really fun story. All right, so that's why he brings him there, and he wants his family to be safe for the very reasons we talked about earlier. Saul's still on the loose, and so he wants to keep his family safe, and he asks them there. Do you remember, Randy, how long he wants them to be there?
No.
He says, until, anybody write that down? Until he knows for sure what God's plans for him are. So he's seeking the plans of the Lord, and until he's got that affirmed, that he wants his family to be safe. Number 4.
Okay, David and his little army is led by God to return to Judah.
Yes.
Of course, Saul will immediately know David has returned. He will accuse his own men of not being loyal to him and taking David's side. The only one to stand with King Saul was Doeg the Edomite.
Oh, you got him twice, didn't you?
Yeah.
There you go. You're going to remember him, Mom.
Yeah.
Doeg.
Well, I call him Dog.
Okay, there you go.
Oh,
You'll
what?
remember. There you go. All right, number 5.
I'm not completely sure of this, but what does he tell Saul, and is it the truth? I saw the son of Jesse going to Nob to Elimelech, the son of
Hittub.
Hittub. He inquired of the Lord for him and gave him provisions, and God gave him the sword. And no, he did not ask the Lord; he did it himself. Is that not right? When I
Okay.
got to this part, I was like,
Okay, so Doeg is the only one who is going to stand up and tattletale on David, and you had most of that right. Ahimelech says Doeg says Ahimelech gave him provision, which would be what? The bread. And we don't know if there's anything else, but we know the bread for sure. He gave him the weaponry, and then he says, and he inquired of the Lord for him. What would that mean?
Prayed to God
Prayed
for
for
his
Your
safety or whatever.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
he lied.
So the inquiring of the Lord. Twofold things. There could be, of course, prayer to the Lord, and then the prophets and the high priest would the prophets receive information from the Lord and all that. But in this particular case, what they're actually talking about is a very specific thing. It's that inquiring of the ephod, of the Urim and the Thummim that we've talked about before. That coming in, it's Trudy, it is the weirdest thing that we don't really have a lot of information about, but during this time frame was very common. We're going to see it over and over and over through our Samuel study. That is how the high priests would go to God and speak to him, ask questions, and then these stones that were in the breastplate of the high priest. In fact, again, if you look on your package for today, the ephod and that stuff is there. Somewhere in the pockets were what was called the Urim and the Thummim, and it was almost like a yes/no thing that you would ask God a question, and the answer would come in this stone. It started with Moses.
Supposedly some of the lights, so it was a
The
three-way thing.
word actually means lights and perfections, and there's speculation that there was some lighting and stuff. I hesitate to teach that because we don't know that. But it
I
is.
know that it was a simple two-way, like flip a coin, this or that.
Well, the questions were always yes, no. As we go through here, we'll see. They're always yes, no questions. And so the discussion becomes, I think, is probably more true that it is yes, no, because the questions are yes, no, and so it would be answered that way. Did it light up? People say that it did, that the breastplates with all the stones had special meanings to it. But we don't know that for a fact. The Jewish rabbis write a lot about it, and they have a whole different theory on it. But they don't have any additional information than we do. So that's why I would hesitate to teach that part of it. But what we do know is that it started with Moses. When Aaron became the first high priest, what he was made for Aaron actually had a place for the Urim and the Thummim, and so it started way back with Aaron, the first high priest, and this is something that they had had all along.
Maybe it's like those mood rings that light up.
Yeah. I mean, or the little 8 ball that you shake. I don't know. No, it was something that God specifically used for this time frame. I wish there was more information. I think it's a fascinating study.
Well, there
And-
are some stones. Is it amethyst? There's a stone that changes colors, like from lavender
Sure.
to blue or whatever.
Sure.
I mean,
It
I used to have a ring that did that.
There's a lot of possibilities that I'm not discounting anything that anybody's throwing out there. What I'm saying is scripturally we can't prove any of it. Other than the fact that these were a way, and so when he speaks of inquiring of the Lord, that is specifically what he is talking about, is that. All right.
Okay, but that, he didn't do that though, wasn't that?
It just
that
wasn't
part
said to
It was not, there was nothing in our story that says that he inquired of the Lord.
No.
However, based on the response that we're going to get, and because I studied this week's already, I can't remember, it must be in 23, we haven't been in it yet. Based on the response that Saul's going to get in chapter 23, we know that wouldn't be unusual for him to inquire of the Lord. For
But he
David.
does say
Well,
that.
Pardon me?
Doug does say, he says
He
that.
says that he
that.
inquired of the Lord, and so that what we don't know that is because there's nothing in this chapter that says that he inquired of the Lord. But Doeg says he saw him inquire of the Lord. So one of two things: either he did, and we just did, it wasn't in the story for us to read, or he's lying about that to make it sound even worse, so that Saul's really going to get mad, because really that was something that was between the high priest and the king most often. Most often.
So would that answer to that be?
Is this the
I said it was a
truth?
partial
What's the answer
truth.
to that?
So the answer to that would be, part of it was the truth, and part of it was
Because he did see him and did see all that.
Right, and so the inquiring of the Lord, we do not know about, so that's an iffy thing. So we're not sure if all of it is the truth.
So that was
Inquiring
the
of the Lord
Lord
question.
could be through prayer,
Yeah.
or could be the way he wrote all of his psalms. He seemed to have gotten some inspiration. Or
Right,
through
but
the
in
high
this
priest.
particular case, we're going to see in this week's chapter, it was specifically from the ephod that Ahimelech. The inquiring of the Lord in this case is definitely that. The other ways, does David use those ever? Yeah, he does, but not here, not in this case. All right, so let's go on with number 6. That would be. Are we in
It would be
number
under
6?
Jane.
Jane doesn't have that. Well, do you know it already?
Oh, I haven't even read it yet, so I'll pass.
Okay.
King Saul is in a rage and
Oh.
summons Ahimelech. What does he accuse him of? Conspiring with David against King Saul.
Okay.
How does he defend himself? Well, David is loyal, so that's
How does Ahimelech can defend himself?
Oh, how does Ahimelech? Well, he says, how could I be against you as the king? And he gave him all sorts of excuses. Let's see. Did I inquire of God for him? Let it be, far be it from me, that he knew nothing
There you go.
about it.
There you go. I knew nothing about what was going on with all of this. Why would you accuse me of conspiring with David? I don't even know really what you're talking about here. I don't have a clear picture. That's a really good indicator that early on when David came to him, he was somehow unaware of all of this that's going on, because Ahimelech is not going to lie about this.
Right.
You know,
And
he's going to
I
tell.
think that also that he defended David and he defended himself.
Yes,
with
he
it.
did. Absolutely. That his first defense was of David, and then he defended himself. That's right.
Would that mean a denial of using the Urim and Thummim, though?
No.
No. Nope.
Because that would have given him some knowledge of what David wanted was.
Well, remember, when he says, "Have you inquired of the Lord for me?" That's what he's asking him up here. We don't even know if that's true. If when Doeg said that he did that, so I'm just saying when inquiring of the Lord happened, it was always with the ephod.
No,
in
I'm
this
just
case.
thinking, Doeg reports back to King Saul.
Yes.
That he inquired of
Yes.
the Lord, and then Ahimelech says, no, I didn't give him any information.
Well, he what he actually says here is, let's read it and make sure that we have it correctly. Let me find it for you here. Give me just a minute. I'm in chapter 23. We're not there yet. Called him and he said, "Now, sons, here am I." He says, "What have you done?" Ahimelech answers and he does the defense of David that we talked about. "Did I then begin to inquire of the Lord for him? Far be it from me. Let not the king impute anything to his servant." And so, in the translation that the various translations and the one that I have that comes directly from Hebrew word for word says in that particular base, "Have I only today begun inquiring of the Lord for him? Far be it from me." That's actually the way too that when I went through Samuel with Dr. Fruchtenbaum, that's how he did it also, explained it, was that it would have been something that he would have done before. And have I only today, is this the first time you think that even if I did inquire, is this the first time that it would be? Far be it from me. So whether, whatever it is that he's saying, King Saul is certainly not buying any of it, right? All right, so but number 7, what happens now? Sherry,
Sorry.
do you want to play with us?
Fading there. Big night last night, sorry. We were at the, whatever it was.
Went to the tent.
The tent.
Okay, number 7. What totally irrational thing does Saul command to be done? That Ahimelech and his whole house be killed.
Okay, so that the priest would be killed, Ahimelech and all of the father's house would be killed. We talked about last week that fulfills a prophetic word. What was that prophetic word?
Eli.
Way back in our first chapter. To Eli. To Eli, that your entire house will be destroyed. Way back then. The many of these young people, I say young, I don't know that, many of these priests would have been from the lineage of Eli. And so the fact that they would have been destroyed is going to fulfill that prophetic word. Is that the way God would have, it goes back to that whole orchestrating, what a terrible thing to have orchestrated. But God's foreknowledge already knew that that's how this was going to come about and would occur and happen.
In that answer, I saw the word turn.
Say what again,
I
Nelson?
saw the word turn because he said turn.
To the guards, he was telling
And
the guards to
kill- yeah,
turn and
kill-
slay.
Kill the priests of the Lord.
Uh-huh.
And they
Turn
would-
and kill the priests
Like,
of the Lord.
They wouldn't have done
They
it
wouldn't
other
do
than
it.
him saying turn and go around and do it the other way.
And kill them. And kill them all. Well, who ends up doing it?
Doeg.
Doeg. That's right. That dog, Doeg. That's right. And why would the people that Saul commands, his army, his people, why did they not do it?
They didn't want it.
Because it's a priest and they're
God's people.
how many people throughout history, when you think of the history books, have been placed in that position of doing things? Leaders give direct commands that you are to do something. You know that it is not right. Everything about you. Now, there have been many people that have had to do it because of being in military and they've, followed orders. But you think of yourself, putting yourself in that position and how difficult that is when someone gives you a command to go out and do something and you know that is not right.
But they refused when he told them to kill Jonathan too.
Yes, they did. They did refuse to do that. And so when he says go and kill these priests, the people said, we can't.
No.
We're not going to do that. And so the fear of the Lord was greater than the fear of Saul, right?
And he had kind of been doing some off the wall stuff. Anyway.
Kinda,
So
yeah.
they, so they kind of knew he
Shish
wasn't
kebab.
maybe all right.
You know, it's got to be hard to follow a crazy leader. That's not a pleasant thing.
Especially when you know you might be the next one.
No, that's right. Nobody wants to have to follow a crazy leader that's going to put them in positions of danger, of great danger.
There's
And
been a lot of those.
absolutely, there's been a lot of those. And you wonder how many people have been pulled in against their will and been fearful for their lives or their families' lives or whatever and done things that they know are against what God would have them do. That's a terrible position to be in. All right, and so finally, why does David blame himself for everything that's about to have happened?
He set everything in motion by going and asking for the food. Actually, the running started.
But he said when he saw Doeg there, he knew he would tell Saul.
Right. He said, "I knew when I saw him, I knew he was going to come back."
Yeah.
And he killed all of the priests. That wiped out. That wiped out
And-
all of the
yeah.
priests.
And all
Wiped
the
out
women and the children.
And the
Everything.
children.
All.
Because remember,
Women,
Doeg
children,
doesn't just
nursing
stop
infants.
with the priests.
No.
Doeg goes in and destroys the
Men,
town
women.
of Nob, where the tabernacle is kept. The priesthood, their families, their children,
And
their
their
animals.
Yeah,
Their,
everything.
back in the day, that's how it was done. When you went in and destroyed a city, you destroyed everything from the chickens to the children.
So that was the whole priesthood of Israel.
It
at
was
that
it
time, right?
well. It would have been the priesthood, except for one that gets away.
The son.
The
one that goes
the
with
one
him.
that gets
I
away
read
from
it
there.
this week.
But that is a huge loss in, in what's going on there now. That whole city, that whole priestly city, is taken down. And so David feels some responsibility there because he knows that he lied to the priest. He knows that the story that he gave was not true. He made a somewhat unreasonable request. Going in and asking for the showbread was not a typical normal thing that you would do. And so he put people's lives in jeopardy for his own benefit. And the part of that that's important to remember as we move forward with this is that David, this is not the only time you're going to see David do that. He does have that capability within him, but he always feels the remorse of that when he does it. That is the primary difference between David and Saul. Saul did many of the same things and never felt remorseful and never returned and never repented and never asked for forgiveness. David did many of the same things, and we're going to see as we move along. He does some other things that are pretty bad. But David always comes back and feels the remorse and the shame and repents of it and turns back. And that's the primary difference, not in the actions, but what you do once you have sinned. So that's the really important lesson for us.
Okay, Doeg, it seems that killing 85 priests, everybody in the city, all the animals, whatever, did he do that single-handedly?
You know, it seems so unreasonable to think that he would go and do that. But again, I'm just going to pull you back to Scripture. There is nothing that says that anybody joined him, only that they said no. How would you do that? How would one man go through and slaughter that? I cannot even begin to explain that.
And there's no resistance?
And catching the chickens. Since
Catching the chickens.
all the animals.
I have no idea how that would happen, but we are given no indication in here that anyone went along other than, I can't, other than Saul?
Who knew
I don't
there
know.
were AK-47s in those?
Good heavens. Very,
Quite
very. All right, we can probably turn this off now. Thank you, Francie. All right.